welcome. I think just big initial word of welcome to everybody, and I think thank you for coming. Thanks for being here today. It's a very special occasion. Today marks the 50th anniversary of our arrival as a family. Little family of my brother Rupert, my sister Lucy, myself. Myself being by far the youngest. I was 5 years old and I'm afraid don't remember the day much at all. But my mind must have been on other things, as perhaps any 5-year-olds would have been. But today, 50 years ago, the Erskine family arrived at Idasvallei and we're here to celebrate that. So have a wonderful time, and thank you very much for all your friendship and all you wonderful people have done to make my mum's and my father's life before so wonderful and so enriched. Thank you.
She told me the recipe and everything.
With Campbell, and this is my husband next to me. We live up the road on Rustenburg Farm, and we have always felt so grateful that the Erskines came to Idasvallei 50 years ago to keep on the tradition of the Viljoen family, and I'm sure the Viljoens are equally grateful to them. So thank you, Philip and Fiona and the family, for everything you've done for the valley and for Stellenbosch as a wider community. Thank you.
That makes us 85, but anyway, we'll see.
I'm the next door neighbor. My name is Joep Marie. I've been their neighbors ever since I moved in here. I was here about 3 or 4 years before them. Delightful, fantastic people. Best neighbors you could ever wish to have. Thank you.
I like that. I like that.
My name is Philip Barrett. I met the Erskines in 1995. I had previously spent quite a few years working at the Castle of Good Hope under Francois Vilion, restoring the murals on the interior of the castle, and I had heard that Major Erskine wanted some murals done, so I telephoned him and told him that I'd worked with the Fagans at the castle. He invited me to come and have a look and explained that all the plaster had actually been chipped off with any traces of original on. So we had a free rein to design new murals, but using the same palette of the castle and the same style. So that is actually what happened. So I repainted every room in conjunction with what the Erskines liked and what suited the furniture and what was historically appropriate. And then after that, I was asked if I would restore this rather beautiful gable behind us, which I proceeded to do. Philip Erskine actually had a huge set of scaffold made from bamboo, which I was a bit nervous to climb up, but he was a big man and he said, "Look at this," and he climbed up ahead of me, which I found amazing. Anyway, after I'd completed working on this gable, because just to recap, I had worked at Groot Constantia on the wine cellar under Jan Correvane. So basically I know what to do with lime mortar. So once this was satisfactorily restored, I restored the front gable, and then the Erskines asked me to restore the wine cellar over there. And then after that, I restored picture frames and I did some bronzes and ceramics for them, because apart from my restoration, I do sculpture as well. So it's lovely to be here because it feels like I'm coming home.
Hi, I'm Fiona, Eddie and the family. Roseanne here, your neighbour.
Thank you for inviting us to this very auspicious occasion, and what a lovely, lovely afternoon. Well done, 50 years, awesome. Take care of yourselves, and all the best for the future. Fiona, Eddie and the family, Roseanne here, your neighbour. Thank you for inviting us to this very auspicious occasion, and what a lovely, lovely afternoon. Well done, 50 years, awesome. Take care of yourselves, and all the best for the future.
It's nice to see all our old friends here. There's one in front of me actually I haven't seen for years. He looks a bit older, but he doesn't look too bad. Anyway, it's beautiful to be here, and thank you to the Erskines and good luck to them.
Fiona and Philip and Tom and I have been friends since they came here permanently to live in South Africa. And we are still friends. We are like family. And their children played with my children at Vergelegen and Idasvallei. We were always together, and we did so many things together. And I must say, Philip and Fiona are two outstanding people, and everybody who meets them loves them. And it will be like that until there are no Erskines. And they bought the most beautiful Cape Dutch house. They restored it remarkably. Philip was very, very artistic. It was wonderful to watch him restore this place. And then he also painted. And there are so many paintings, and he sold so many paintings. So he was a wonderful artist. And his second child, Lucy, inherited his gift, his talent, and she paints beautifully. And Rupert, the eldest, lives in Swellendam, and I think they are very happy. And Eddie and Debbie have got the farms in KwaZulu-Natal, but they often come and see Fiona. And I usually come every Sunday to have lunch with her. She's very stuck up. She won't come to me. I always have to come to her. Now, Fiona is one of my dearest and nearest friends. And we will be friends until we're both somewhere else. And Philip was a dear, and he was a wise man. And I think we all miss him very much. What a privilege to know Fiona and to have known Philip, and for our children to have grown up together. Thank you.
I thought we should mark the occasion with a few words. And of course the first thing I would say is welcome. Welcome from all of us. Welcome from the Erskine family to what is for us a very special occasion. And it's wonderful that so many of our friends have been able to come out and mark the occasion and celebrate with us today. So I think a very, very big word of thanks, warm vote of thanks to all our friends for being here to help make the occasion special. And particularly for Mum, this is something that she had marked in her calendar. I might have let it go sliding by, but Mum never misses a birthday, as you know. She never misses an anniversary. When I rang her up a few weeks ago and said, should we come down for your birthday in February? She said, well, there's a much more important date. You won't come down twice, why don't we do it then? So in a way, this is a double celebration. Mum's birthday 2 weeks ago, but a very, very big occasion. The family arrived here, as you know, on the 1st of March 1972. And there we were, Mum and Dad, Philip and Fiona, 3 young children. Rupert, where are you? My brother. So this is by way of introduction, in case you haven't recognized my dear brother, Roo. And with us today is Malcolm, his son, who's behind Roo, raising his glass there for anyone who hasn't met Malcolm yet. And Annelle is Malcolm's girlfriend. So I'm just sort of going around by way of introducing the family. My own dear wife Debbie, who's worked hard at this party. Thanks, Deb, for all your hard work, putting out the teacups, getting it all organised, mobilising the team, and thank you for your energy and enthusiasm. My son Tom, out there, up in the clouds. Tomo, thanks for being here. Tom's in his last year at Stellenbosch, and has taken up in the Viljoen house, in very comfortable accommodation there, and while he completes his law degree and his accounts degree. So that's quite an accomplishment. Tom, well done, and thank you. My elder sister Lucy sadly can't be here, and I don't blame her. I think she's a little gun shy. Last time she came out in the autumn, she got rustled into a sort of what I call an airport hotel in Gatwick, and was in kind of quarantine for 10 days at Boris's pleasure. And I'm not sure she's quite recovered from that, and hasn't quite worked up the courage to come back to visit us. So she needs some convincing that she's not going to be isolated a second time. But she sends her warm regards to, and many of you know Lucy and her family, and she would love to be here. It was her idea to make a cake with the Idasvallei gable on it. So if you'd like to at some point get a glimpse of it before we invite our honoured guest, Christo Viljoen, to come and cut the cake. But we'll do that at the end, and when I've said what I must. So that was really that. I always like to tell the story. It really adds a sort of perspective to it, and it adds some sort of meaning, and our story of how we arrived here in the early 1970s is a story, I think, which at least in part needs telling. And some of you are familiar with the story, and some perhaps less. Father, as you know, my father Philip was the son of an army general. He followed his own father into the British Army and served 20 years in the Scots Guards. And I think he may have gone on and perhaps taken his father's place as a general too. But painting in New Zealand when he was 80-seated Governor General gave him the most unfortunate bout of lead poisoning, which of course he got from splashing paint all over his face and licking his paintbrushes. And if you knew my father, you'd know that that's exactly how it would be. And I think it baffled the New Zealand doctors, and for a while his life hung in the balance. And his gut and his belly and all bits of him were sort of what Mum calls the stuffing in a bear, was rather jeopardized. And as a result of that, he was partially medically boarded, and I think it was quite obvious his army career was coming to a close. Edward Heath, Ted Wilson and Heath were running the show in England, and England was a gloomy place indeed. In 1972, little's changed. But it was a particularly gloomy time, and Father had no appetite for a life in England. So I'll leave that there. My mother's side of the story is a little different. You've got to wind the clock back to the early days after the war. My father returned from, my grandfather, that's Mother's father, Edward Ratcliffe, returned from the war to take up his place in his country estate in Devon. They had a beautiful estate in Plymouth, which had been used as a hospital during the Second World War. And Clement Attlee's government said that's a splendid place for a hospital, really, and we ought to kind of have it. And I think we were paid 3 shillings 6 an acre, and they took it. A lovely estate, and my poor grandfather was absolutely demoralized and crushed. He fought that expropriation to the highest court in the land, And when his friends finally pulled him out of the House of Lords, a heartbroken man, he came to live in Somerset West with his family, where my mother and her brother Mark and her mother Mona took up in Somerset West. Mother was here from 1948. For about 10 years. She left in 1958 to go on her travels back to England to meet the family, where she met up with Dad. And there the story comes together. They lived a happy life as a young married couple in the officers' quarters, going from pillar to post. And as Mum reminded me this morning, they had 14 moves in less than 10 years. The first 10 years of their life. I think they lived one MFO box to another, one move, one army quarter to another. Caterham, Edinburgh, Windsor, Caterham and back to Windsor, and so it was, shuffled around. Germany, back to England, move after move after move. And finally they came to South Africa as a couple with their 3 young children on the Windsor Castle. In 1971, January 1971, the Windsor Castle pulled into Table Bay and our lives had started in South Africa. We settled in short term with Granny in Somerset West in her home, while Mum and Dad started to make plans for their future. And their eyes fell upon this property, and it was quite a long drawn out saga to acquire it, but that's another story. Eventually it became ours, and we moved in here on that glorious day, this day, 50 years ago. I was a tiny boy, I was 5, and my mind must have been on other things. I don't have a clear memory of the day, but I can tell you what this garden looked like, and I can tell you a little bit about the homestead. The garden is, I think, what you'd describe these days as a wilding project. I don't know if any of you watch these sort of farming programs on DSTV, but if you let your farm just go to nothing, you're some sort of a superhero in England. And everybody loves all the insects and the mites and the mice and the bits and pieces, and they bring their television cameras and they tell you how marvelous and how clever you are. Well, this was a wilding project of that scale. The weeds were about as tall as a man's shoulder. These drains and ditches had really fallen in. This garden had almost disappeared under a sort of mat of vegetation. It was hard to know there was a garden here at all. The house itself was much the same, fallen into ruin, or semi-ruin during the Victorian times. The Victorians had a gay old time, altering it in every way they could. Each generation had added a bit and subtracted a bit and done the most extraordinary things. There was a tin roof, the pitch of which was higher. The walls and windows were changed with casement windows, the verandas, the open courtyards had been filled in, and the inside of the house was a rabbit warren. No grief knows how anyone lived in it. It was smoky, dark, and quite a difficult place to live in. And I think we weren't in it for more than about 3/4 of an hour, and we moved to the gatehouse. Where upon Gabriel Fagan, Gabi, esteemed architect, got his hands on the project, and Mum and Dad set about very enthusiastically the restoration of Idasvallei, which was really a sort of a 10-year program. I think the main homestead took about the first 2 years, and then we did the wine cellar, and then we did the Viljoen house, and bit by bit we managed to bring it back. Dad had the garden in apple pie order in no time at all. He had commanded a squadron of local gardeners, and the wilding project was shelved. The lawns were re-exposed, beds were put in, trees were planted, and the garden that you see today and that you can enjoy in these beautiful, under the shade of these beautiful trees, was recreated from an unhappy time. And how wonderful it's been. Yes. It's a very good time in my talk to make mention of somebody very special who's amongst us, and for the first time in living memory wearing long trousers is Craig Blees. Craig has been on this team for nearly 10 years now, and Craig is the life and soul of Idasvallei. If you notice how well it looks, if the walls are painted and please your eyes, if the garden's well tended and the lawn's mown, the ditches beautifully redone, it is 150% entirely at the hands of Craig Blees. So congratulations, Craig. Yeah. Your contribution here is incalculable, and our gratitude is as much as that. And thank you very much for all you do. Well done, Craig. It's really a magnificent show. Thank you. Growing up in this part of the world was a wonderful privilege, and I think you'd all know that any young person who can grow up riding ponies over the African veldt, my sister and I had the enormous joy and privilege of being able to ride all up and down the valley here, and Simon's mother, Pam, allowed us to ride all over Rustenburg. So I got to know this valley really from horseback, chaperoning my sister Lucy on art rides all over the valley. And what a wonderful, happy memory that was. Later, growing up, Chris Suter joined the team at Rustenburg, I think as general manager in about 1980. He came with 4 sons who were all more or less my age, and I became tremendous friends with them. And the Suter boys and I had free range over Rustenburg and Glenbourne and Skoontezicht. And we would fish, we would ride our bicycles, we would camp out under a canopy of African stars. Such is the lot, I think, that you would say falls to few boys these days. And it's an immense privilege to grow up in this valley. And for that, I remain eternally grateful. It was a happy childhood. It was a remarkable place to grow up. One little anecdote, and I think I just don't want to make this too long, but I think when I was about 16, I managed to work out how to hotwire the Morris Minor when Mum and Dad were out. And the great joy of it roaring into life. And I think you all know that joyriding is a great sport. And joyriding the Morris Minor was James Suter and I were off imagining we were doing the Paris-Dakar all over Simon's farm. And we lost control on a bend, and we ended up taking down a stretch of fence about 20 yards long, which mostly wrapped under the axle and round the wheels and across the hub. And finally we came to a halt in a sort of massive cloud of dust, and we were perched on, I was driving, we were perched on a sort of a mound in the vineyard with all the wheels spinning and none of them anywhere near the ground. It was quite obvious, luckily we hadn't done much damage to the car, but it was quite obvious we were in a bit of trouble. So I prayed for help, and the Almighty sent me help. I said, very quickly answered, look at that, there's someone coming down to help us. I only hope it won't be Pam. Well, it was Pam, Simon's mother, walking the dogs, and how wonderful she was. Oh, she said, oh, Eddie, I think you're in a bit of trouble. She said, I shall get Etienne to come and give you a tug. I think you need a tug with a tractor. I shall get Etienne to come and pull you out. I was just absolutely shocked. I was a 16-year-old boy. What is happening? I thought I'd be dead man, dead mince. But she was so sweet and kind. She said, I think we ought to keep this between ourselves. So we were rescued and the car came. But I mean, I only tell you that as a sort of innocent little anecdote, not to illustrate not in any way to illustrate my rebellious tendencies as a child, but to tell you my affection of the property, the value of neighbours. And I think Idasvallei has been that special place for us as a family, a wonderful, happy home to grow up. Mum and Dad have made it a happy home for us, 3 children, and for our grandchildren. And our friends and neighbours here have made this a wonderful time. Yup, across the road, where you Yup, it's been wonderful being neighbours with Yup all these years. I mean, I've known Yup since I must have been 5 years old with a mop of white hair. And that's a friendship and a neighbourly friendship that goes on, and I can't express the gratitude for that and what it means. So we started this story, and I should draw to a close. We started really at the end. At the end was the Erskine family's arrival at Idasvallei, and perhaps our arrival here in 1972 was the end of the beginning. As Churchill said after Alamein, the end of the beginning indeed. But let's turn briefly to the beginning of the beginning, because I think that's really where it all began. And our 50 years here, as marvellous as they are but a passing moment in time. This property has been here, as you see it, for 250 years. It's been here in other ways, developed for 100 years before that. So if you go back to the days of the trading post of the Cape of Good Hope, when the Dutch East India Company established their trading post in Cape Town, And after 30 years, they realized that company employees were not supplying sufficient food for the company, for the ships rounding the Cape. They began to grant land to the free burghers, the free citizens of South Africa to be. And one Huguenot settler, Francois Vilion, and his wife Cornelia came upon this property, Groot Idasvallei. And the title was granted to them in 1680 or thereabouts. And they are and have become the progenitors of the Viljoen clan, who are numerous. I have always understood that even 20 years ago, the Viljoen clan now number some 20,000 people, not only in South Africa but across the world. And that's something to toast, and that's something to celebrate, and that's something to be immensely proud of. So our time here is but a time in history. This was and has been in many hands. This is a farm that's been big and has shrunk, like many of the other properties around this part of the world. This property has grown wheat in it. There was a mill on the Cromer River just below us on our southern boundary. The millstones that we find in the garden all around here bear testimony to the fact that wheat was once grown in the alluvial soils of this part of the world. Cattle, livestock, sheep, fruit, vines, all produced at Groot Idasvallei, at Rustenburg, Klein Idasvallei, and all the farms proclaimed in this part of the world form part of the story, form part of the great tapestry. And the Viljoen family, I think, as progenitors, as the first settlers here, and we were very honored to have Christo, who I think we would regard as being one of the preeminent Viljoens in South Africa. We are very happy and proud and delighted to have Professor Christo Viljoen here today. And I'm going to ask him to come and cut the cake in honor of his association with this property. We have an Idasvallei cake. It doesn't say Groot Idasvallei, Christo, but it is the gable of our beloved homestead.
Wait a minute, come over here.
Good, yes.
Okay, so we're going to wait for Mrs. B and Tom to arrive. They're going to be here in a minute. I think we'll get a photograph in a minute. Let's cut the cake.
Eddie, you'll allow me just one word. Now, if you'd warned me, I could have prepared an impromptu speech, which I didn't do, so I'm not going to bore you with that. But thank you very much for your speech and your reference to the Viljoens. I feel very much at home because this place was originally granted to Francois Vilion, who was a Huguenot refugee arriving at the Cape of Good Hope, and his good wife Cornelia Campenaar. He was Wainwright, and then he started farming, and he was a rather successful farm because within a few years he produced quite some wines and quite some fodder for the animals for the surrounding people. It was one of the 6 first farms allocated to free burghers in the newly found town of Stellenbosch in 1682. And the original farmhouse, called the Jonkershuis, or the Viljoen house, was built by him. The original house was only comprised of 3 rooms. It is the only original farmhouse from the 17th century in all of South Africa, still in existence, which makes it quite something remarkable. And then it changed hands. The opstal you see at the back here, the main one, that was built about a century after the Viljoens left by Samuel Johannes Katz, who erected this building. And it's believed that this side was the front entrance. And then, as Eddie has indicated, it fell into dilapidation. I first met Fiona and Philip in 1974. Yes, 2 years after you arrived here. Yes. And that was 1 year before we celebrated the 300th anniversary of the wedding of the Viljoens in Cape Town, the progenitors. and we planned a Viljoen festival. And in December of 1976, some 910 Viljoens came to Stellenbosch for the first Viljoen festival. And we held various functions all over town in buildings belonging to the university. But the main function, the family festival, the concert was held in this building. And Philip cleared it out because he started using it at that stage as his studio. And we had a marvelous time here. In 1989, with the 300th anniversary of the arrival of the Huguenots at the Cape of Good Hope, again we held a Viljoen festival, again the main function being held here at Idasvallei, that time starting on the grass just behind me and ending up in the building which here behind, again cleared by Philip and arranged in a way which made us welcome here. Thank you, Fiona, and thank you, Philip, for what you've done to restore this heritage for the Viljoens. We couldn't have chosen a better couple to do it for us, and we're so grateful that the original Viljoen farm is in the hands of people who loves it, who cherishes it, who revived it to a large extent, and who keeps it in such a wonderful shape. And it's my great pleasure to cut this cake on the 50th anniversary of your arrival at Idasvallei.
Congratulations.
Well done. Thank you, Krista. That was really wonderful. Thank you for those kind words. And it's wonderful to have you here today. So I'd like everybody here to stay, to remain a while longer, to drink some of this delicious wine produced by our neighbours here, fruit of the valley, and eat the magnificent spread of puddings that has been kindly brought by everybody. So please carry on, mingle, and let's spend the rest of the afternoon and the early parts of the evening enjoying this lovely summer's afternoon. Thank you again.
You can stand in front of me here, right?
You have to stand up straight. You have to stand up straight, Fiona.
Okay, take your mask down a little. Special occasion.
Right off, Fiona. It's going to spoil the picture.
Here we go. Okay. 1, 2, smile. And we're going to do a crazy one. 1, 2, put your best craziness on. Yay!